Bagseed Chronicles is a podcast about cannabis and the people who enjoy it. I hope to provide commentary about cannabis cultivation.
It's always a good feeling when you grow your own, man. You enjoy it so much.
Hey guys, welcome to the Bagseed Chronicles. This is Uncle Dig. I wanted to go over what the plan is for the podcast moving forward, just so everyone knows. This is season 1, and it's going to conclude when harvest is complete. Maybe when I've chopped the last plant, maybe when I've trimmed the last one into jars. I'm not 100% sure yet. I'll let you know. I'm going to take the upcoming week off. I have a friend coming in to visit me here at the bungalow, and we are going to get fucking twisted and play music and stuff. So maybe there'll be some bonus content, right? But you're not going to get your regularly scheduled program. And if you do get a garden update, it might be slurred. So with all that being said, please enjoy my interview at the end of today's podcast with Tahir Johnson. Please share this podcast with a friend. With that being said, let's get into a garden update. Uncle Dig's garden update. Hey guys, it is 9/3/2021. And we are in gardening zone 8B, and this is a garden update. It has been smoky, but cooling off at night. The forecast says that we are in for some hot weather coming up, though. My tomatillos are producing like bonkers. They've really liked these cold nights. My peppers are finishing, and I'm getting tons of jalapenos. Most of my cannabis is an early to mid-flower. The garden in the Black Domina section smells like peppery, stinky, stanky weed right now. One plant is developing purplish, almost black edges on her leaves, and the other is not. This weed smells so good. The CBD that is flowering early smells like a damn cookie with some sort of citrus frosting. It has started to go amber and has been flushed, i.e. I've only been giving it water for a week. I look forward to harvesting her as soon as she is ready. Her two sisters are in week 2 of flower and have received their second dose of flowering nutrients. They are very tall. One is almost 8 feet tall, even though it's in a silly little 20-gallon fabric pot. I hope to get a lot of CBD-rich flower from these girls for a little less crack in my old soldier back. My star killer is in mid-flower and starting to smell amazing. I'm worried that this might not have the advertised indica high due to all the citrus this girl is putting off, but in late flower, the smell may change. My alien OG is bulking up rapidly in week 2 of flower. She smells absolutely amazing. Already a weird sativa smell mixed with a hint of citrus and crust punk. And the buds are like goddamn rocks. This one is going to be awesome. I hope. The strawberry dream, the Bagseed, is being absolutely bulletproof. She is my happiest plant. She is starting to bulk up in her second week. She doesn't quite smell too deeply, other than a vaguely pleasant weedy smell. I think I will be able to smell her better once I cut down her CBD neighbor. Well, that is it for my garden update. I hope everyone is able to stay safe out there from the fires and the like, and let's overgrow the world. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Tahir Johnson to the Bagseed Chronicles. Tahir Johnson is a Howard graduate, director of the Social Equity and Inclusion of the U.S. Cannabis Council. He holds a certificate from Oaksterdam University in cannabis cultivation and also does a bit of home growing himself. Welcome to the Bagseed Chronicles, Tahir.
Uncle Dig, what's going on? How are you?
Very, very, very good. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. Can't complain at all.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. What have you been smoking on that has you kind of excited?
Oh man, you know what? Today I was smoking on some Bubba Kush, man. Old school, oldie but goodie.
Oh, I always love Bubba Kush. Nice indica leaner, mellow, easy to hang out. Not going to completely put you down unless you're a newbie. Very good.
Right, right.
I've been
How
real.
about you, man? What you
Oh,
smoking on over there?
right. I just did a bong rip of some stuff I picked up recently that I have like heard of, but I'd never really smoked. It's called Fruit Loop.
Mm,
It's I think it's newer. It's from a local dispensary here that's vertically integrated called Top Shelf. And
okay.
it's pretty good stuff.
Nice, man. With a name like Fruit Loop, it sounds good. Sounds fruity.
To me, and my palate is kind of garbage. To me, it almost tastes like salsa verde, but I don't think that's what they were going for. So, what are you growing? Anything interesting, or is there anything that you are interested in growing that you're excited about coming up soon?
Yeah, so right now we're actually my dad and I are growing some purple kush here in our house. And we're coming up on the end of our flowering cycle and it's looking beautiful, man. So I'm super excited to get ready to harvest that. And then pretty soon we'll be smoking it. So it's always a good feeling when you grow your own, man. You enjoy it so much.
Yeah, I really, really enjoy growing my own as well. I actually talked to your dad about that, George, and we were talking about how he was going to come back on and talk about it once y'all harvested. I'm really excited to see how that stuff turns out. He's saying y'all were getting some pretty respectable looking yields. He's thinking, so that's pretty excited to see.
Yeah, we'll see, man. And this is his first time, like growing like indoor, like in a with using the nutrients and kind of really manicuring it and everything. So he's been loving it, man. He's actually been leading the way, and I've just been peeking in on it, giving him little pointers here and there, and like already had all the equipment and stuff he needed. So he like I said, he's enjoying it, and this has been something cool for us to do together.
Yeah, y'all are doing a killer job too. I love seeing he'll post on Instagram, he'll post in his stories sometimes little him singing jazz over video of his cannabis. It's fun.
Yeah, he sings to the plants like every day. Most of the times, if I'm around the house and I don't know where he is, he's probably in there in the garage, like doing something with him.
And then what do you think y'all are going to grow next?
You know what? I actually still have some seeds from some Ghost Train Haze, the super dope sativa that was a Cannabis Cup winner. So I would love to try to grow some of that next.
I've had Ghost Train Haze.
Yeah, man, we'll probably rock with that. That was the last time that I had grown something, which was in like 2019, before I took a little break. That's what I grew then, and it was some fire. So looking forward to that.
As I remember, Ghost Train Haze is a more psychedelic lean in sativa. If you're new to the plant or hand taking it a little too lightly, it can really creep up on you.
Oh yeah, that's definitely not one of the rookie ones. Like that one is it regularly tests like above 30% like THC. So like I said, that's definitely like a one of those connoisseur ones. The genetics come from Rare Dankness out of Colorado.
Okay. I've heard of them and I've heard of that strain. I've smoked some here on the Oregon market, and it's very, very, very potent.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's switch lanes a little bit. I understand that you're the director for social equity on the U.S. Cannabis Council. What does the U.S. Cannabis Council do?
Sure. So the U.S. Cannabis Council is the broadest and most diverse coalition of cannabis businesses. representing the industry. We represent a number of different organizations as well as multi-state operators. And my role there is really to advocate for social equity in both policy and programs. So, for example, recently provided comments to the Office of National Drug Policy Control, as well as today we're submitting our final comments around the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, as well as I'm helping to develop a number of different programs for our members to help focus on diversity and equity and inclusion, as well as support for social equity. And really, like I said, the goal of the U.S. Cannabis Council is to push for federal cannabis legalization, but also for that to be done in an equitable and inclusive manner.
Right, and something you said stood out to me because I'm not a really intense political cannabis guy. I'm kind of, let me grow it and leave me alone. But I do follow some stuff, and I haven't heard of the did you say the Cannabis Administration Social Equity Act?
Yeah, so the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, it was
Okay.
actually, the discussion draft was recently introduced by the speaker, by the leader Schumer, Senator Booker out of New Jersey, and Senator Wyden out of Oregon. And that is, it's a bill to that would federally legalize cannabis. And it's probably I would say, the most broad piece of legislation of that type that's been introduced so far. They did a really good job of trying to make sure that there is restorative justice for communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs. But they also start to introduce a regulatory structure of, what it will look like should cannabis be legalized. So, it's an exciting time, for these things to be moving forward, and for the first time a bill to be introduced in the Senate.
Okay, and that is impressive because I'm even a month ago, me and Lucas, I made a pretty bold prediction on my show that the Senate wasn't going to be very active this year, and they've gone ahead and proven me dead wrong. It looks like. I've kind of haven't been. I kind of stopped following politics the last 3 weeks. There's been other stuff going on with the war in Afghanistan. I think a lot of us are kind of taking a breather. So when you talk about restorative justice, exactly what does that mean?
So restorative justice means that communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs, one, for them to be able to benefit from, cannabis legalization, from the money being able to go back to those communities. Another big thing is right now there's over 40,000 people still currently sitting in jail for cannabis charges, while for something that's legal. And a number of businesses do it with a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I think probably the most important part of that is making sure that people that have been harmed by the war on drugs can come home. And again, if they want to be a part of this industry, for them to be able to be a part of it. But I think those are really some of the biggest components of it.
Yeah, and restorative justice is basically trying to make right the problems with the war on drugs, and it outsidely affected more urban and more Black and brown communities than it did white communities, both as a side effect of how enforcement was carried out. But what we learned later from the Nixon tapes, that it was actually designed to suppress some Black resistance movements and even civil rights movements. It was a backdoor way to attack the Black community and the political activist community in this country.
Yeah, man, it's super interesting. This year is the 50-year anniversary of the war on drugs. And like you said, it's something that has impacted everybody, right? There's people that of all colors, creeds that have been arrested for cannabis. But as you pointed out, African Americans, Latino, indigenous community have borne the brunt of that. African Americans are, on a national average, 3.7 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis, despite using at equal rates of Caucasian counterparts, as well as in some places it was as high as 20 times, and greater, more likely for being arrested for cannabis. So again, it's just all about making sure that as it has been legalized, the damage that has been done to those communities as a result of that can be repaired, through and benefit from cannabis legalization.
And this brings up another unfortunate like economic impact that all this property seizure has had. Like, so you have redlining, and for the listener who isn't familiar with redlining, you should check out the interview that we had with Tahir on the Cannabis Corner with Lucas Barfield. But really quickly, can you give a quick synopsis of what redlining is for the folks that maybe didn't catch that episode?
Sure. Well, the interesting thing is that, again, to be able to participate in the industry, there are several barriers of entry. Typically, if you look at the amount of capital that it takes to be successfully get in the industry, when it comes from just applying for the licenses, having to have real estate and all those things, it tends to keep communities of color out. And in some places, as we already talked about, those numbers where communities are more highly impacted by cannabis charges, and there are even places where if you've had a previous cannabis charge, you're not able to participate in the industry. So those are some of the things that are keeping those same communities out of participating in cannabis and benefiting from it being legalized. But again, there are states that are taking great steps and measures that are to improve on that. Since the last time we talked, New Jersey, where I grew up, they just recently released their rules. And I think they did a fantastic job. Literally, you could apply for licenses for as low as $100. We've never seen
Wow.
things like that before. There's no capital requirement, no real estate requirement. And like I said, I'm very hopeful about what we'll see in different places like New York and Connecticut and Virginia, and how they'll continue to push the envelope to try to make it a more equitable and inclusive industry.
And I think this is important that people understand. All of this is very important from a social equity, and that is from a social equity perspective, and that's very important, and that's the most important part of this. But business owners need to understand something that they're not thinking about, and that's brain drain. You have experienced operators, right? In these people who have cannabis convictions, right? You have experienced operators that know how to run a small business that's competitive in a cutthroat market like cannabis, whether it's legal or not. It's a very competitive market. They know how to keep books accurately, sometimes without the aid of proper accounting software. They know how to keep track of product. They know how to grow product. All this experience is lost when you cut these people out of the industry, sometimes for very minor offenses.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point. And that's a great point that you brought that up, because like you said, the people that have been doing this in the traditional market, really carrying the industry forever, don't really have an opportunity to be in it, and that doesn't make much sense. But social equity in itself in cannabis is a new concept, and it's one that the cannabis industry is leading the way on. Where the first social equity dispensary was in Oakland, California, and I believe he got started in probably like 2018 or 19. So again, it's a new concept, and it's continuing to develop and grow as it takes root in different states.
Well, and I think people also, they lack the education. If anything else, a lot of people in certain socioeconomic classes or jobs don't ever even get exposed to, first of all, the information that there's a problem. Like if they don't follow the news super closely, they may never be introduced to these concepts. And if they're never introduced to them, and they're never introduced to a lot of the things they take at face value that may be problematic, like the way that policing is distributed across communities in this country doesn't make sense from a public safety standpoint, like stuff like that, they really don't. But then you start being exposed to one idea and then another idea, and then you start to really be able to challenge the overall narrative and really understand where problems are and where they can be fixed.
Absolutely, man. I think you you hit it spot on, man. And you know, like again, it's something that is you know, it's something that's really important, and it's not just something that people readily know. And it's what attracted me to the industry back in 2018 when I was learning about the cannabis industry. I was working in finance, and you know, I would have just assumed that you know, people that had been, you know, traditionally involved with cannabis were a part of the industry. But as I started learning about it, and I was like, oh, these are all, you know, multi-million-dollar businesses, and the biggest challenge being capital that kept people out. You know, I that's what attracted me to the industry and wanted to use my skills and background to try to help make a difference. And I've been super thankful at you know, what I've been able to do in these past few years and trying to make an impact.
And it looks like you're doing a great job. I've seen you out within the cannabis media more and more, and I'm seeing not only you, even since I've talked to you, but I've been seeing a lot more traditional cannabis operators. You know, like, you know, white cis males who are starting to talk about social equity in a way I had never heard some hippie on the hill talk about social equity 2 years ago, and now you hear it.
Absolutely, man. And you know, to be honest, man, it's just good corporate, you know, social corporate responsibility, right? And understanding it like from a corporate standpoint, diversity and inclusion drives profits. It drives employee retention, happiness. It drives creativity. There's so many reasons just from a business case standpoint to do it, but just from being a good global citizen or person, right? You know, and I think cannabis is so much about community. I think it's the right thing to do. And there are companies, you know, that are really doing taking strides to try to focus on social equity. You know, I was really honored. A week ago, I got to have a meeting with our social equity and inclusion committee, and had people that are like the social equity lead people that lead the social equity and diversity, equity and inclusion departments at some of the largest operators in the country, that are really committed to trying to make a difference and an impact on the industry. So for me personally, it was, you know, really touching to see. And you know, there are companies like Curaleaf that have the Rooted in Good program, like Ease that has the Momentum program. Man, the parent company, Jay-Z's company, they have the fund. You know, there's just you know, there's a whole new wave of people trying to make differences and you know, really change the industry and create opportunity. And that's a trend that I hope to see continue.
I hope to see it continue too. And I will say the past 2 years have been, you know, both, you know, discouraging in some of the new regulation in Washington and some of the problems out there with the regulations. And some other states have been having problems like Mississippi Supreme Court, for example. But there's also been some really encouraging things in the social equity realm in the places where we've been able to get cannabis actually, if not legalized, then legislated and kind of decriminalized. Um, Now I saw that you went on vacation recently. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh man, it was amazing, man. So I was just in the U.S. Virgin Islands with my mom and my little brother. I was actually supposed to be taking a vacation. We were just supposed to be going from Friday to Monday, but you know, what I learned is that they're on island time out there. So when we were taking our flight from St. Croix to St. Thomas to get back home, it was running late. And so we missed our flight back home, and we ended up having to stay till Friday out there. When I tell people that I was stranded and couldn't get a flight home from the Virgin Islands until Friday, nobody seems to feel sorry for me. But it was it was an amazing time, man. 7 days. I got to snorkel, got to meet some great people out there, people that were you know, good friends. And man, like I said, it was just an amazing time. Beautiful beaches, great food, good bud too, as a
And I was
matter of.
going to ask about that. That's why I asked about your vacation. How was the cannabis in the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Well, you know, the interesting thing, man. So there was a range of a range of all types of cannabis out there. But they actually had some good loud. And the thing that was the most interesting to me was, I asked, do people grow here on the island? And they said, they do some, but I was really surprised to find out that they said the majority of the good weed they get from California, just like everybody else in the world. But so, that, like I said, that blew my mind that here we are in the islands, and they said they were like, yeah, I have California weed, and proudly. So I guess it's not like Jamaica, right? The Virgin Islands is U.S. territory, so maybe they're a little bit on to U.S. culture.
Well, and I would almost wonder how severe the laws would be if you were cultivating cannabis in a U.S. territory. I don't know. Is that immediately federal trouble? You see what I'm saying? It might not be. It might not be smart to cultivate there. And one of the reasons that California and to a lesser extent Oregon have become such hotbeds of cultivation is because people will come out here, they'll go up in the hills, they'll do a big grow, and before anyone thinks to ask whether or not it's permitted, harvest is come and gone, and all that shit went back east or went back wherever it went, and whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
they've been cracking down on that locally hard. So I would not be, at least here in the two twin counties I live in, Josephine and Jackson counties in Oregon, in Southwest Oregon, and then down in NorCal, there's been concentrated federal with local law enforcement's efforts to shut down the illicit market, specifically the ones that are here growing big and then bailing, basically.
Right. Yeah, I imagine, man, because like I said, out there's probably like huge like grows out there just because it's so abundant.
They were busting greenhouse grows, like light depth grows with thousands of plants that everyone locally had just assumed were permitted because they were so big. Nah,
Right.
they
See,
were
on the
just
East Coast, you couldn't get away with that because they would
no.
stand out too much. You can't just have like a greenhouse or like a whole field of weed. You would get caught instantly.
Like every year in October here in Oregon, it starts poking over everyone's fence. So everybody who home grows, like everybody kind of knows. And it's a very, very prevalent here, but mostly for personal use. But there's a lot of people that grow here. So it's an environment that's, I don't want to say friendly to cannabis cultivation, but if you're still here, you've pretty much tapped out. If you don't like it, you're like, whatever, they're going to grow it,
Yeah, I mean, plus, I mean, out there, I mean, if somebody is like if somebody's like growing cannabis in like Oregon, then they must really love it and want to do it, right? Because the price is so cheap, right? If you want to just consume, there's not really a need to do that, right?
I would kind of say that we have some of the cheaper prices in the country for sure. But we have our spendy weed, but you can keep yourself, in an eighth or two a week for pretty cheap. But it's also legal to cultivate here. Just if your landlord's cool with it, or if you own your place, you can grow four. You don't need
Okay.
you don't need medical card. You don't need
Mm-hmm.
anything. You need to like either have permission from your landlord or own your property. And depending on what city you're in, like there's a town near me called Medford. They've got an outdoor cultivation ban that's enforced by complaint, but indoor you could grow there. And most of
Got
the
it.
towns out here, if you had a fenced in backyard with a tall privacy fence, you could grow four monsters.
Wow. And then with the environment out there, you could do it out. You could do it outdoors if you wanted to. Totally, couldn't you?
Yes, I would say it's getting a little more challenging with all the smoke.
Got it. Got
It's
it. Yeah.
been,
So I'm sure like the past couple of years have been kind of crazy for that.
yeah, yeah, it definitely seems to, I mean, you're still getting big outdoor harvests, but they're not as dense. They're not always as big as I remember them being, the buds.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of like really, really scaled back my expectations over what I think I'm going to get off a plant to about half
Mm-hmm.
of what I used to expect. I
Yeah.
used to expect that I would get anywhere from a pound to like 2 pounds off of one of my 30-gallon pot plants. So if a cannabis plant's in a 30-gallon pot and everything goes ideally, right, I can expect 1 pound to 2 pounds, right? I've only ever hit 2 pounds once, and half of it was covered in aphids, and I throw it out, right? Something always goes wrong. But I don't, I even off of my good plants, I just kind of have told myself, like, if you get a 1/2 pound, that's fine. Because, you know, the way I grow is I'm not pumping a lot of nutrients in flower. I'm kind of lightly starving them. I'm one of those old school growers that kind of lets their plant kind of fall apart toward the end of its life a little bit. I think it imparts a flavor to the smoke. I may not do it next year. We'll see. But it's just an additional stress. You know, sometimes the smoke's not too bad, but this year we've had degraded like sunlight, you know, I mean, the sun's red right now and it's almost noon, and it's like a yellow, like light. It's not like a full, good, bright sunlight. So it's been having an adverse effect, I think, on the plants, both in volume of the buds and an overall potency.
Man, I was dealing with some spider mites earlier today. I was like, we got all the way to the end just for this to happen now.
Oh, that's usually when I get mites. Like I got mites once, and I got them the last week of flower. It was one of my first grows in my garage, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to try to do this without doing any IPM. I'm not going to spray. I'm not going to let any predators go in the tent. I'm not going to do shit. And I'm like, man, I'm getting away with it. Yeah. And then week 8 on a 9-week flowering indica, mites. But
that's exactly where we are, though. That's the crazy part.
I chopped. I cut off the affected buds and I chopped, and I was able to smoke the rest of it, and it was fine. It wasn't quite as couch locky as I was hoping, but I was happier to have the ounce of bud off that plant than to not have it at all. And so I went ahead and I chopped early, because once you can see them, they're all up in your shit.
Man, because that like it was like the leaves were turning yellow, and like you can tell the ones that are, like you said, that are affected. I got the organic insect soap, so we'll see, man.
Yeah, but if they keep going on you, like if you've only got a week left, I mean, that's just a difference in how much amber trichomes you get. Like if it's an indica, it may be less couch locky. It may not be as
might be better to just chop it, huh?
It might be, but if you're going with the soap, go with the soap and watch it. But if you don't notice a positive change in like 2 days, man, like I'm not telling you what to do with your garden, but
I'm glad I'm getting your advice, man.
But if I were you, I like if you've already sprayed the soap, look, give it a couple days, right? But if they're still advancing after 2 days, you've already got good bud there. Like it's
we do.
So like if you chop it now, what happens is you start drying it. Eventually the mites won't be able to eat it. It'll be too dry and they'll die on it. And then you can kind of like take a scope and look, and you might be able to save more than half of it. But if you let mites get all up in it, you know what I mean? And they I don't know what their life cycle is, but it's not long. They spread quick. And if you can see the webbing already, yeah, like if you like I knew the mites were there, because I was like in there like scoping my plants, and I saw like a ghost of like a webbing on the side of my plant. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And they were already in one of my buds so much you could see the webbing. So I knew. So I mean, I chopped and I had a good time. I only had to cut out like a little bit. But so now that's if we're in like week 8 of a 9-weeker. Because you're so late in flower, you've already got cannabis. Now that week might have taken it from, mid shelf to top shelf, but I would rather have, 3 ounces of mid-tier bud than 5 ounces of shit that's like infested with mites,
Right. Definitely don't want to smoke mite weed for sure.
And I've smoked some weed that I probably shouldn't have, like that had like little aphids in it or whatever, but I don't recommend it. If you can see the bugs on it, that's probably too much bugs to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and honestly, if you're smoking outdoor cannabis, even good outdoor cannabis that's getting like rinsed off every day with water and like really taken care of, it probably has at least one bug somewhere on that plant. Like, I mean, it's outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're finding like caterpillars in your bud, like at the dispensary, that's not okay. But like, but
Knock on wood that never happens.
I found a dead caterpillar in a bud. I broke it open, and I could tell they had treated late with BT, because what happens is when the caterpillars get infected with the BT bacteria that's in that's bacterial spray, they'll kind of
Mm-hmm.
crawl out the bud, and then part of their body will become like black and desiccated. They'll die and fall out. Because they get really sick really quick and die. They stop eating and then they die. But I found one that hadn't finished crawling out the bud before it died. And I could see it when I started opening up the bud. I thought it was like, sometimes you'll find like a seed on like the outside of really cheap weed that's like shiny, or maybe you'll find like, a bit of a beetle or something or whatever, if it's really cheap or whatever. But I'll buy some cheap weed, folks. Anyway, let's not talk about nasty ass weed I'll buy. But the pandemic was rough on me because I couldn't smell it first. And so I ended up buying some silly shit.
That's true. That did change the game, not being able to like smell it first and see it first.
All this happened during the pandemic. My beetle weed, the caterpillar weed that I threw out. And then another person had so many aphids and stuff on their weed. I took it back to the dispensary, and they took it back from me, gave me my money back, and threw out the lot. That's how like nasty it was. So like,
wow.
if I bring the weed back to your dispensary, that's a bad sign, because it's got to be ratchet for me not to like gut it. I'm bad. I'm like, this is there's starving kids in Texas that don't have weed. So like I'm
weed. I'm not throwing it away.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's got THC in it. I'm not throwing up when I smoke it. So but yeah, so the pandemic was not good for me, and I know that they're still having problems, but in our shops, they're letting you, they're blowing it at you with a fan now. So you can at least smell it. And that's kept me out of a little more trouble. And also staying away from the really, really cheap, like $3 and $4 a gram stuff has also helped me not run into that as much.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Bugs are kind of the constant battle with growing plants outside, especially cannabis. I've had problems with bud worms. Bud worms are pretty big out here. And when I say bud worms, we're talking about caterpillars, and we're specifically talking about the larva of tomato hornworms, right? So that's one. And then we're talking about white cabbage butterflies. And here's the kicker: white cabbage moths. And those three, yeah, all caterpillars from all three of those. Around here, it's mostly cabbage butterflies, but all three of those caterpillars will get inside your buds, and they have this wonderful habit. So their mother or whatever will lay an egg on the outside of your cannabis plant. You can't really see it. It's like tiny and yellow or tiny and white, and they'll just lay one. It'll look like a fleck of dirt or something. You might not see it. It's very small. And then that little caterpillar hatch, and it'll crawl right into the center of your bud where you can't see it. So it'll crawl. You know how like a lot of bugs will be on the outside of your buds. They don't really like touching the trichomes because they stick to it.
Right.
This caterpillar doesn't care about the trichomes because it's going to eat your trichomes. So it goes in there, and then it starts eating and shitting inside the bud. So it's eating your trichomes inside your bud head, and then shitting in there. So the way you find a lot of growers, including me, have found out they have caterpillars is you'll see botrytis mold on your late flowering bud outside. And you'll be like, oh, fuck, I've got mold. But it's not, the mold is there because if you pull apart the bud, you'll see a caterpillar in there, and you'll see all its poop, all the caterpillar poop, because they don't really move much. So they'll just crawl around the stem on the inside of your big outdoor colas, just eating and shitting. They're awful. They're one of the pests that I've dealt with every year since I started growing outdoors. I lose a certain percentage of my colas. I think maybe this year I'm spraying BT once a week until the last 2 weeks of flower, and I'm hoping that that'll do it this year. But they're a pickle.
That sounds terrible.
Oh yeah. Like there's all kinds of crazy pests. There's mites, which can become endemic to your garden and can be a real problem. There's russet mites, spider mites. What's another really aphids? Aphids are something that if you let get out of hand can be a real problem. But a lot of times, if they're becoming where they're just landing on your plants constantly, because what happens is you'll get one of them little black winged aphids, at least around here. It'll land on one of your plants and you may kill it, but what you didn't see is all the little green babies it just had. Mm-hmm. And so they'll just infest really quickly to where you can't spray them off. But a lot of times if you've got them that bad, it's because you've let them get that bad, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So there's some things you can do. And at the time when I got taken over, I didn't really know what I was doing. I recognized the problem too late. So the best thing for pests is to have an inquisitive mind and to spend time with your plants. Like you noticed these mites because you spend, you and your dad, between you guys, you spend enough time staring at the plants. You know what they're supposed to look like. So when they deviate from that, or you see something on your plants that you don't normally see, you'll notice it quicker the more time you spend with your plants. So the gardener's greatest friend is his shadow on his plants, right?
Amen to that.
And on that note, I wanted to thank you for coming on to the Bagseed Chronicles Tahir. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the audience before you go? Any pluggable things that you'd like to plug, like your Instagram, maybe a website, anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure, man. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's Tahdiddy, TAHDIDDY. Check out my podcast, the Cannabis Diversity Report, everywhere podcasts are available. And if you're at MJ BizCon this year, hopefully I'll see you there. I'm speaking on the 20th. I'm doing a panel about social equity in new markets in cannabis. So it's a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me, Uncle Dig, and shout out to everybody out there.
All right. Thanks for being on the Bagseed Chronicles. Let's overgrow the world. Thank you for listening to the Bagseed Chronicles. The bumper music is performed by Chad DeVilliers. You can find him on YouTube at Ukuleles Are Stupid, or on Instagram at Chadwick Enterprises. Harmonica and guitar and any vocals are performed by Uncle Dig. I can be reached at uncledig4@gmail.com, or follow me on Instagram at Uncle Dig.